different desires express themselves differently. And if we look at, let's say, the world at large, it's like it's filled with desires of unimaginable magnitude, how each and everyone wants to express themselves, right? Someone wants something at each given moment in time. Sometimes it's just to have enough on the table, right? That's the legitimate desire. Sometimes just enough to cover the roof, right? That's a legitimate desire. And it goes. And there seems to be sky's the limit. Literally, sky's the limit. For some people is to leave this planet and go live on the other planet is the ideas that they are driven by, right? Like, because that seems to be the translation of their, let's say, trajectory, in my perspective, gone berserk, right? Slightly, instead of creating that enclosure in a sense of falling back onto itself, not knowing how to do that, not knowing how to find that beautiful way where the waves returns back, where one needs to find the repose within, where would one go if you have all the riches in the world? Well, of course, you will be like these guys like Elon Musk. You would want to go to Mars. You would want to create something no one done before. So the one's legacy is then in that. Also, these are desires, right? Desires. We can, of course, redress this and why some desires are aligned with the evolution, and some desires simply seem to go or seem to be have propensity of their own, just spinning out of its own unstoppable, whatever that force.
Like a whirlpool. Yeah.
Exactly, like a whirlpool, that in Christianity, dragonfly, like that kind of like where it's considered to be the whirlpools of negative energy, because it does not revolve around the axis of creation, but it creates the opposite direction, or attempts to create the opposite direction. So that this is a different discussion altogether. But sometimes it's helpful to behold this, let's say, with an eagle eye, that overview, how all of us desire something. And it's unimaginable in terms of its expression. Unimaginable. And of course, there are patterns in that. We can see there is in that overall ocean of this, let's say, everyone desires something. We could maybe see that there are some currents, undercurrents and currents, certain desires, like certain members of society, they are gravitating towards this kind of desires, you see. Others are gravitating towards this kind of desires. But all desires ultimately are ways of self-expression. The self expresses itself. So from this minute point of view, from this vantage point, from the vantage point of an individual, it seems like you or I desire something. But we forget that we might belong to a current, right? Larger current. Something is at play, and we're simply channeled, taken in, because of whatever circumstances, alignment we have reached to that point, the frequencies with which we are, let's say, humming at a given moment in time, brings us to a certain current, and it somehow becomes more dominant in our life. At least this is my understanding of how we seem to be drawn to certain aspects more than others, right? Like some people will be obsessing about, right, the latest Ferrari. Some will be just obsessing about it on the level of, well, just witnessing it. Others owning it, right? So yeah, it's legitimate. The Ferrari exists in consciousness. It doesn't just exist in Monte Carlo's car race, right? In Grand Prix. No, it obviously is there. in consciousness, there is enough magnanimity to have, saints, Dalai Lamas, right, Thich Nhat Hanhs, right, Martin Luther Kings, and Ferraris. In consciousness, there is place for Hitlers and Mao Zedongs and Stalins and what have you, not Genghis Khans, and this all have to be at some point reflected by us. How all this can happen in consciousness. All these very legitimate, healthy topics to reflect on, to take us outside of, let's say, this immediacy of likes and dislikes and righteousness or lack of thereof.
Igor, we've gone from the myth of love and desire becoming vapor, being a primordial force in all things, to the individual and how best to weave their life with this understanding. Very comprehensive picture. Thank you. There will be some people looking to understand, because there's Tantra as a word. Where does this live in this tapestry?
Well, the example of Patanjali Sutras was given specifically to include and juxtapose that at the same time, how even in the traditions where Patanjali Sutras belong to, which is a yogic tradition, which has this unapologetic attitude towards, let's say, practice of exemplified in control of the senses, withdrawal of the senses, right? That pratyahara, being, effectively speaking, fostering discipline. And this can be seen throughout so many spiritual traditions, East, West, doesn't matter. You can see that discipline approach is absolutely a must. Tantra here stands as unique in a sense that it understands the inseparable nature of desire from who we are in this embodied form. And it understands that, as what I've mentioned earlier, even the physical shape, the constitutional setup of how we come into this world, it's like the instrumentality best suited to fulfillment of what is sown in the first place in forms of psychic impressions that are carried through the subtler bodies when the physical body perishes. All this is accumulated in a psychic field. I'm now deliberately not using yogic terminology so as to, for every listener to relate to this. So that psychic field, that psychic resonance, literally in the form, and then maybe if people want to understand this, and that's why I brought the epigenetics here, that it's something constantly in motion, right? That something is constantly in the way of influencing and being influenced. Because DNA is not a molecule. DNA is what gives rise to the molecule. DNA is a frequency, it's a vibration. DNA is a field. So DNA is a velocity, is a frequency of vibration. And the strands and the way the DNA vibrates, it gives rise to the RNA when, effectively speaking, sound collapses into a form, sound collapses into something particular. So that's where the first molecule is being formed.
Hey there, Inspired Evolutionary. If you absolutely loved this, well then here's a full conversation with this guest on the Inspired Evolution podcast. Check it out now.